My wife will leave this house with exactly what she brought into it, absolutely nothing. Nathan Whitmore's cold voice echoed through the courtroom as he looked at his wife of 5 years with complete indifference. The room fell silent. Everyone expected Isabella Foster to cry, to beg, to fight for the luxurious mansion, the expensive cars, or the millions they had built together. Instead, she smiled. A calm, almost heartbreaking smile. Then she looked Nathan straight in the eyes and said, "You're right. I'll leave with nothing, because everything I truly own was never inside this marriage." A murmur spread across the courtroom. Nathan laughed. His mother, Caroline Whitmore, smirked with satisfaction, while his sister Amelia whispered just loud enough for everyone to hear. "She still doesn't realize she's the one losing." But none of them knew the truth. Within 30 days, the man who believed he had taken everything from his wife would discover that the woman he called worthless was hiding a secret so extraordinary it would destroy everything he thought he knew about wealth, love, and success. By the time he realized what he had thrown away, it would already belong to someone else. 3 months earlier, Isabella stood quietly in the Whitmore mansion, preparing breakfast for the family that had spent 5 years convincing her she would never be good enough. She had no idea that this ordinary morning was the beginning of the end. Isabella Foster tied the apron around her waist and glanced at the clock. It was 6:15 a.m. The Whitmore mansion was still quiet, but she had been awake for nearly 2 hours. She believed that no matter how badly someone treated you, kindness should never depend on how you were treated. She carefully placed pancakes, fresh fruit, scrambled eggs, and coffee on the dining table. Nathan liked his coffee black with no sugar. Caroline preferred herbal tea. Amelia only ate fruit in the morning. Despite years of insults, Isabella never forgot anyone's preferences. Just as she finished setting the table, Caroline walked into the dining room. She looked at the breakfast spread before turning her cold gaze toward Isabella. "So this is what you're serving?" "Yes, Mrs. Whitmore. I thought everyone would enjoy." "I wasn't asking what you thought." Isabella immediately fell silent. Caroline picked up her teacup and frowned. "It's lukewarm." "I'm sorry. I'll make another one." "That's your solution to everything, isn't it?" "I'm sorry." Before Isabella could answer, Amelia strolled in, scrolling through her phone. She looked at the table and laughed. "I swear, every breakfast looks like it belongs in a small-town cafe." She looked Isabella up and down. Then again. "I guess that's all you know." The two women laughed together. Isabella simply walked back into the kitchen to prepare fresh tea. She had learned that silence often protected her peace better than arguments ever could. A few moments later, Nathan entered. His tailored suit fit perfectly, and his attention was fixed on his phone. "Good morning," Isabella said with a gentle smile. Nathan barely looked up. "Morning." She poured him a fresh cup of coffee. "I remembered you have a meeting with the overseas investors today. I packed the documents you left on your desk." Nathan took the folder without even asking how she knew. "Thanks." Before Isabella could sit beside him, Nathan's phone rang. He answered immediately. "Yes. I'll be there in 20 minutes. He stood up. "I'm leaving." "You haven't eaten." "I'll grab something on the way." He kissed the air near her cheek without actually touching her and walked out the door. The sound of his expensive sports car faded into the distance. Isabella stood there for a moment, staring at the untouched breakfast. 5 years ago, Nathan never left the house without hugging her. Now, he couldn't spare 5 minutes. Caroline watched everything with satisfaction. That's what happens when a man outgrows his mistakes. Isabella slowly turned. "What do you mean?" Caroline folded her arms. "My son has become one of the most successful businessmen in the country." Her voice hardened. "And yet every time people see him, they ask the same question." She leaned closer. "Why did a man like Nathan Whitmore marry someone like her?" Amelia smirked. "You embarrass him." The words hit harder than Isabella expected. Not because she believed them, but because Nathan had never once denied them. That afternoon, Isabella decided to visit Nathan's office with the lunch she had prepared. She wanted to surprise him. Maybe they could spend just a few minutes together. Maybe things weren't as hopeless as they seemed. When she arrived at Whitmore Technologies, the receptionist smiled politely. "Mrs. Whitmore, Mr. Whitmore is in the executive conference room." "Thank you." As Isabella approached the room, she heard laughter from inside. The door wasn't completely closed. Then she heard Nathan's voice. "I know, she's a good person." A man laughed. "Then why are you still married?" Nathan sighed. Because divorce isn't as simple as people think. The room erupted with laughter. Another voice asked. So you never loved her? Nathan didn't answer immediately. Then he said quietly. I loved the woman she used to be. Isabella's heart skipped a beat. Nathan continued. But people change. I've outgrown this marriage. Isabella stood frozen outside the door. The lunch basket slowly slipped from her hands. The glass container shattered across the polished floor. Silence filled the hallway. Inside the conference room, every conversation stopped. Nathan slowly turned toward the door. Their eyes met. And for the first time, there was no warmth left between them. The shattered glass echoed through the hallway. Every executive inside the conference room turned toward the open door. Nathan Whitmore froze. There stood Isabella. The lunch basket lay on the floor beside her, homemade food scattered across the polished tiles. For a brief second, guilt flickered across Nathan's face. Then it disappeared. Everyone, give us a minute, he said. The executives quietly filed out, avoiding Isabella's eyes. Some looked uncomfortable. Others pretended they hadn't heard a thing. When the room was empty, Nathan closed the door. Neither of them spoke. The silence was almost unbearable. Finally, Isabella looked down at the broken container. I wanted to surprise you. Nathan rubbed his forehead. You shouldn't have come. I know. She knelt to pick up the broken glass. Nathan sighed. Leave it. Someone else will clean it. Those words hurt more than he realized. Someone else. As if the meal she had woken up before dawn to prepare meant nothing. As if she meant nothing. Isabella slowly stood. Were you telling the truth? Nathan didn't pretend not to understand. You heard everything. I heard enough. She searched his face, hoping to find the man she had fallen in love with. Instead, she saw a stranger. When did you stop loving me? Nathan looked away. I don't know. Try. He remained silent. Then he spoke the words she never imagined she would hear. I think, it happened little by little. Her heart sank. So while I was trying harder to save our marriage. You were changing, Nathan interrupted. We're different people now. No, Isabella whispered. You've become a different person. Nathan's jaw tightened. This isn't helping. What is helping, Nathan? Pretending everything is fine while your family humiliates me every day? They're difficult. They call me worthless. They're old-fashioned. They've never accepted me. They will eventually. She looked at him in disbelief. 5 years. Her voice trembled. It's been 5 years. Nathan had no answer. Instead, he walked toward the window overlooking the city skyline. I've been thinking about this for months. A cold feeling spread through Isabella's chest. Nathan. I think we should end this marriage. The words landed like a knife. Even though part of her had expected them. Hearing them spoken aloud broke something inside her. Tears filled her eyes. Is there someone else? Nathan answered immediately. No. Then why? He turned to face her. Because I want a partner who fits the life I built. The sentence hung in the air. I don't understand. You don't belong in this world anymore. She stared at him. This world? The business dinners, international events, charity galas, investors. He hesitated before saying the words that would haunt him for years. You have nothing to contribute. The room became painfully quiet. Nothing to contribute. The woman who had stood beside him when he couldn't pay his rent. The woman who believed in him when no investor would. The woman who had secretly saved his company. Now had nothing to contribute. Isabella wiped away a tear. I see. Nathan reached into a drawer and pulled out a thick envelope. I've already spoken to my attorney. She looked at the documents. Divorce papers. He had prepared everything. Long before this conversation. Long before today. You planned this. I wanted it to be clean. A bitter smile crossed Isabella's face. Clean? She gently placed a hand over her heart. Does this feel clean to you? Nathan said nothing. Just then, the office door opened. Caroline and Amelia walked in without knocking. Neither looked surprised. It was obvious they had known all along. Caroline folded her arms. It's about time. Amelia smiled. I told you he would finally come to his senses. Isabella looked from one face to the next. So, everyone knew except me. No one answered. Caroline stepped forward. Sign the papers with dignity. You've already had 5 years of a life you never deserved. Amelia added with a laugh. Let's be honest, you'll leave exactly the way you came. With nothing. Nathan remained silent. His silence spoke louder than their insults. Isabella looked at the divorce papers one last time. Then she picked up the pen. Nathan frowned. You're not going to argue? She looked at him calmly. Would it change your mind? He couldn't answer. She signed. One signature. 5 years of marriage. Ended in less than 10 seconds. She carefully placed the pen on the table. I'll pack my things tonight. Caroline smiled triumphantly. Good. Then she added coldly. Remember, everything in that house belongs to the Whitmore family. The cars. The jewelry. The furniture. The bank accounts. You leave with exactly what you brought. Nothing. Isabella looked at her quietly. Then she smiled. It wasn't a smile of defeat. It was peaceful. Almost mysterious. She picked up her handbag and walked toward the door. Before leaving, she stopped. Without turning around, she said softly. You're right. I'll leave with nothing. She paused. Because everything that truly belongs to me can never be taken away. Then she walked out. The office fell silent. For the first time, Nathan felt something he couldn't explain. It wasn't relief. It wasn't happiness. It was a strange, unsettling feeling. As though he had just made the biggest mistake of his life. Outside the building, Isabella stepped into the rain. She didn't cry. She simply stood there, letting the rain wash over her face. A black luxury Rolls-Royce slowly pulled up to the curb. The driver quickly stepped out, opened an umbrella, and hurried toward her. He lowered his head respectfully. Miss Foster. It's time. Isabella looked at the familiar face. She hadn't seen him in years. With a quiet nod, she stepped into the waiting car. As it drove away, she never looked back. The Rolls-Royce glided silently through the rain-soaked streets, leaving the Whitmore Technologies building farther behind with every passing second. Inside the car, Isabella sat quietly, her eyes fixed on the city lights blurred by the rain. The driver glanced at her through the rearview mirror. It's good to see you again, Miss Foster. A faint smile crossed her lips. It's good to see you too, Charles. Charles had worked for the Foster family for over 30 years. To the outside world, he was just a chauffeur. To Isabella, he was family. I wish your grandfather were here today, he said softly. So do I. Charles hesitated before asking, should I have intervened sooner? Isabella slowly shook her head. No. You knew this day would come? She looked out the window again. I hoped it never would. Neither of them spoke for several moments. The car eventually stopped before a pair of enormous wrought iron gates. 2 security guards immediately recognized the vehicle. The gates opened without question. Beyond them stretched an estate so breathtaking that it made the Whitmore mansion seem ordinary. Rolling gardens surrounded a magnificent stone manor overlooking a private lake. Ancient oak trees lined the driveway. Fountains sparkled beneath soft evening lights. It wasn't merely a home. It was a legacy. As the car stopped, dozens of household staff stood waiting under the grand entrance. The moment Isabella stepped out, every one of them bowed respectfully. Welcome home, Miss Foster. She smiled warmly. It's good to be home. Inside, the mansion looked exactly as she remembered. Portraits of generations of the Foster family decorated the walls. The scent of polished wood and fresh flowers filled the air. For the first time that day, Isabella finally allowed herself to breathe. An elderly woman approached her with tears in her eyes. Miss Isabella. Without hesitation, Isabella embraced her. I've missed you, Martha. So have we. Martha had been the housekeeper since Isabella was a little girl. She gently touched Isabella's face. You've grown thinner. Isabella laughed softly. I suppose I have. And your eyes. Martha sighed. They're carrying pain they shouldn't. Before Isabella could answer, another man entered the room. He wore an expensive navy suit and carried several folders. Good evening, Miss Foster. Good evening, Mr. Bennett. Richard Bennett had served as the Foster family's attorney for nearly 25 years. He motioned toward the library. We should talk. A few minutes later, they sat before a crackling fireplace. Richard placed a thick folder on the table. I've delayed this conversation long enough. He opened the folder. Inside were financial reports, property deeds, investment portfolios, and legal documents. 3 years have passed since your grandfather's will became fully effective. Isabella nodded quietly. I know. You are now the sole owner of the Foster Group. She remained silent. The international hotels. The shipping company. The technology investments. The vineyards. The commercial properties. They all belong to you. Richard pushed another document across the table. The estimated value of your holdings now exceeds $4.6 billion. The room fell silent. Yet Isabella's expression didn't change. Money had never impressed her. Richard studied her carefully. Do you regret hiding all of this from Nathan? She took a deep breath. I never wanted someone to love my family's name. You wanted them to love Isabella. She nodded. When Nathan met me, he believed I was an ordinary woman. I wanted to know whether his love was real. Richard looked down. It was. For a while, Isabella replied. A painful silence settled between them. Then Richard asked the question that had haunted him for years. Why didn't you tell him the truth when his company nearly collapsed? Isabella smiled sadly. Because helping someone you love shouldn't come with conditions. She stood and walked toward the large window overlooking the lake. Do you remember the anonymous investor who saved Whitmore Technologies 5 years ago? Richard smiled. I arranged the paperwork myself. Nathan had spent years thanking fate. He had spoken at interviews about a mysterious investor who believed in his dream. He never knew. The investor had been his own wife. Richard opened another folder. There's something else. He handed her a newspaper. The headline read, Whitmore Technologies faces investor concerns after mysterious financial losses. Isabella frowned. What happened? It appears someone inside the company has been stealing money. How much? Richard adjusted his glasses. We estimate nearly $28 million over the last 18 months. Isabella's eyes widened. Nathan doesn't know? He suspects poor market conditions. Richard paused. But the truth is far worse. She looked at him. His chief financial officer has been moving company funds into offshore accounts. Isabella's heart sank. Nathan trusted him. He trusted the wrong person. Richard closed the file. If the losses continue, Whitmore Technologies could collapse before the end of the year. Isabella remained silent. Despite everything Nathan had done, she didn't feel satisfaction. Only sadness. Richard noticed. You still care about him. I care about the man he used to be. But not the man he became. She looked toward the rain outside. No. At that exact moment. Across town. Nathan sat alone in his office, staring at the divorce papers Isabella had signed. He should have felt free. Instead, he couldn't stop thinking about her final words. Everything that truly belongs to me can never be taken away. His phone suddenly rang. He answered immediately. What is it? The voice on the other end sounded panicked. Mr. Whitmore. We've got a serious problem. Our largest international investor just withdrew from the company. Nathan shot to his feet. What? And that's not all. The auditors have discovered millions of dollars missing. Nathan felt the blood drain from his face. Outside his office window, a violent storm rolled across the city. He had no idea. The storm inside his company was only beginning. Nathan gripped the phone so tightly his knuckles turned white. Mr. Whitmore, the bank representative said calmly, after reviewing your company's financial position, we've decided to suspend your existing line of credit. Nathan's heart sank. You can't do that. We can. There are concerns regarding your liquidity and the ongoing investigation into the missing funds. I just need more time. I'm sorry, sir. Time is one thing the bank cannot lend. The call ended. Nathan slowly lowered the phone. For the first time since building Whitmore Technologies, he wasn't afraid of failing. He was afraid of losing everything. The next morning, the atmosphere at Whitmore Technologies was nothing like it had been just a week earlier. Employees whispered in the hallways. News reporters waited outside the building. Shareholders demanded answers. Inside the boardroom, the directors looked anxious. One board member cleared his throat. "We've received resignation letters from 3 senior executives." Nathan looked up sharply. "What?" "They're worried about the company's future." Another director added. "Our stock has fallen nearly 22% in 4 days." A third director slid another report across the table. "We've also lost 2 major contracts." Nathan stared at the pages without speaking. His empire wasn't collapsing all at once. It was falling apart piece by piece. Across town, life couldn't have looked more different. At Foster Group headquarters, employees gathered in the auditorium for an important announcement. More than 500 staff members filled the room. When Isabella walked onto the stage, everyone stood and applauded. She smiled modestly. "Please, sit down." The applause continued for several more seconds before the room finally grew quiet. She looked around the audience. "My grandfather always believed that success means very little if it benefits only one person." She paused. "I intend to honor that belief." The giant screen behind her lit up. "The Foster Foundation." The audience leaned forward. "Starting today," Isabella continued, "the Foster Group will invest $200 million into education, affordable housing, children's hospitals, and small business development." A wave of surprised whispers filled the auditorium. No family should lose hope because they lack opportunity. No child should abandon their dreams because they cannot afford an education. And no honest entrepreneur should lose everything simply because no one believed in them. The audience erupted into applause. Several employees wiped tears from their eyes. This wasn't a publicity stunt. It was exactly the kind of leader Isabella had always dreamed of becoming. That afternoon, news stations across the country interrupted their regular programming. A remarkable announcement today from businesswoman Isabella Foster. The newly appointed CEO of Foster Group has pledged $200 million toward national community development projects. Analysts are calling it one of the largest private charitable initiatives in recent years. Nathan wasn't watching television. But Caroline was. She stared at the screen in confusion. "Isabella Foster?" The reporter continued. "Although she has largely remained out of the public eye, industry experts estimate Ms. Foster's personal fortune to be worth several $billions." Caroline's teacup slipped from her hand. It shattered against the marble floor. Amelia looked up from her phone. "What happened?" Caroline pointed toward the television. Amelia's eyes widened. "No. This can't be the same Isabella." The television showed Isabella walking confidently through Foster Group headquarters while journalists surrounded her. Her calm smile hadn't changed. Only the world around her had. Meanwhile, Nathan stepped out of another frustrating meeting when his assistant rushed toward him. "Sir." "What now?" "I think you should see this." She handed him a tablet. Nathan glanced at the headline. Then stopped walking. "Who is billionaire philanthropist Isabella Foster?" His eyes narrowed. He opened the article. Photographs filled the screen. There was no mistake. The woman standing beside presidents, world leaders, and business executives was his ex-wife. He laughed quietly. "This has to be fake." "It isn't, sir." The assistant swallowed nervously. "Our research team confirmed everything." Nathan kept reading. Sole heir to the Foster family fortune. Owner of Foster Group. International investor. Philanthropist. Estimated net worth exceeding $4 billion. His breathing became uneven. "No." He whispered the word to himself. "No." Memories flooded his mind. The way Isabella never cared about expensive things. The way she always avoided talking about her family. The way she refused to explain where she disappeared every few months to visit relatives. She hadn't been visiting relatives. She had been attending board meetings. Nathan slowly sat down. His mind refused to accept what he was seeing. Then another memory surfaced. The anonymous investor who had saved Whitmore Technologies years earlier. Could it have been? His phone rang before he could finish the thought. It was Edward Collins. Nathan answered immediately. "Edward?" "Mr. Whitmore. I thought you should know." "What?" Edward hesitated. "I resigned this morning." Nathan frowned. "You resigned?" "Yes, sir." "Why?" Because the only person who ever treated me like family left that house the day you divorced her. Nathan closed his eyes. I'm sorry, Edward. So am I, sir. But not for myself. Edward's voice grew heavy. I'm sorry that one day you'll realize the greatest treasure in your life wasn't hidden in a bank account. It was sitting across the dinner table every single night. The call ended. Nathan remained frozen. For the first time in years. He wasn't thinking about money. He wasn't thinking about investors. He wasn't thinking about saving his company. He was thinking about Isabella. And for the first time, he wondered if he had never truly known the woman he married. As he stared out of his office window, one question echoed through his mind. If Isabella had hidden who she really was, what else had he completely failed to see? Nathan didn't sleep that night. The article about Isabella remained open on his laptop, its headline glowing in the darkness. Billionaire. The word didn't make sense. Not because Isabella couldn't have been wealthy, but because she had never acted like someone who was. She never asked for luxury. Never boasted about money. Never used her family name to gain respect. She had lived like an ordinary woman. Because she wanted an ordinary life. Nathan leaned back in his chair and closed his eyes. For the first time in years, he wasn't remembering the last few months. He was remembering the beginning. The tiny apartment. The second-hand furniture. The nights they shared instant noodles because money was tight. Back then, Isabella never complained. She always smiled. She always believed tomorrow would be better. A knock on the office door interrupted his thoughts. Come in. His assistant stepped inside. Sir, someone is here to see you. I don't have any appointments. He says it's urgent. Who is it? The assistant hesitated. Mr. Richard Bennett. Nathan frowned. The name sounded familiar. A moment later, Richard Bennett entered the office carrying a slim leather folder. His expression was calm but unreadable. Mr. Whitmore. Nathan stood. I don't believe we've met. We haven't. Richard extended his hand. I'm the Foster family's attorney. Nathan felt his stomach tighten. Please, have a seat. Neither man spoke for several seconds. Finally, Richard placed the folder on the desk. I debated whether I should come. Nathan looked at him. Then why did you? Because despite everything that happened, I believe you deserve to know the truth. Nathan's heartbeat quickened. What truth? Richard opened the folder and removed several documents. The first concerns Whitmore Technologies. Nathan glanced at the paperwork. They were old bank records. Dated 5 years earlier. Richard pointed to a transaction. Do you remember the investment that saved your company when your first investors pulled out? Nathan nodded immediately. I've spent years trying to identify that investor. You don't have to anymore. Richard slid another document across the desk. It contained the authorization signature. Nathan stared at the name. His breathing stopped. Authorized by Isabella Foster. His lips parted. No. Richard nodded quietly. Yes. Nathan looked up in disbelief. She invested in my company? She invested $40 million. Nathan's eyes widened. 40. It wasn't a loan. It wasn't charity. She expected nothing in return. Nathan could barely process the words. But why would she hide it? Richard smiled sadly. Because she knew your pride. If you discovered your wife had rescued your business, you would have refused the money. Nathan lowered his head. He knew Richard was right. Back then, he would have rejected the investment. Not because he didn't need it. Because he wanted to prove he could succeed on his own. Richard continued. She asked me to make the investment through 3 holding companies. So you would never know. Nathan whispered. All these years, I've been thanking a stranger. Richard looked directly into his eyes. There was never a stranger. There was only your wife. Nathan covered his face with both hands. Every interview. Every speech. Every award ceremony. He had proudly thanked anonymous investors. While the woman who had saved him sat quietly in the audience. Smiling. Never asking for credit. Richard wasn't finished. There is something else. Nathan looked up slowly. Richard handed him another envelope. You should read these. Nathan opened it. Inside were receipts. Hospital bills. Pawn shop records. Jewelry valuations. His confusion grew. What is this? Richard spoke softly. When your father became seriously ill 3 years into your marriage. You couldn't afford the experimental treatment. Nathan nodded. I remember. The hospital suddenly reduced the cost. It wasn't the hospital. Nathan looked confused. Richard placed one final document on the desk. A receipt. It listed several priceless pieces of antique jewelry. Family heirlooms. Sold. Seller, Isabella Foster. Nathan felt his chest tighten. Those were her grandmother's jewels. Richard nodded. She sold them. So your father could receive treatment. Nathan's eyes filled with tears. My father always believed his insurance covered everything. It didn't. Isabella paid the difference. She made the hospital promise never to tell anyone. Nathan couldn't speak. His father had died believing fate had given him extra time. The truth was that Isabella had given him those extra months. Richard slowly stood. I've practiced law for 35 years. I've seen marriages built on money. I've seen marriages destroyed by greed. But I've never met anyone who loved as selflessly as Isabella. He buttoned his jacket. She protected your pride. She protected your family. She protected your dreams. And when you divorced her, she protected your dignity by saying nothing. Nathan's tears finally fell. I treated her like she had nothing. Richard looked at him with quiet disappointment. No, Mr. Whitmore. You treated her like she was nothing. The words pierced deeper than any accusation. Richard walked toward the door. Before leaving, he stopped. Oh, one last thing. Nathan looked up. The $40 million Isabella invested. It has never been withdrawn. Nathan frowned. What do you mean? Richard smiled faintly. She never took back a single dollar. Even after the divorce. The door quietly closed behind him. Nathan remained alone. The office suddenly felt unbearably silent. He looked around at everything he had built. The company. The awards. The photographs on the wall. None of it would have existed without Isabella. He walked to the framed Entrepreneur of the Year award hanging proudly in his office. For years, he had believed it represented his determination. Now, it looked like a monument to a lie. With trembling hands, Nathan lifted the award from the wall. It slipped from his fingers and crashed onto the floor. The glass shattered into hundreds of pieces. Nathan dropped to his knees. For the first time since the divorce. He didn't cry because he was losing his company. He cried because he finally understood. He had thrown away the only person who had loved him without expecting anything in return. Nathan Whitmore arrived at the Foster Group headquarters before sunrise. For the first time in years. He wasn't there to negotiate a business deal. He wasn't there to impress investors. He wasn't there as one of the country's most successful CEOs. He was there as a man desperate for one more chance. He stood across the street, staring at the towering glass building. Employees began arriving one by one. Every person who entered greeted the security guards with a smile. The atmosphere was completely different from his own company. There was no fear. No tension. Only respect. Nathan took a deep breath and walked inside. The receptionist looked up politely. Good morning, sir. How may I help you? I'd like to see Ms. Isabella Foster. Do you have an appointment? No. She typed something into her computer. I'm sorry, sir. Ms. Foster's schedule is fully booked today. Nathan forced a smile. Please tell her Nathan Whitmore is here. The receptionist hesitated. I'll check. A minute later, she returned. I'm sorry, Mr. Whitmore. Ms. Foster said she isn't available. Nathan nodded slowly. I understand. He turned to leave. Just as he reached the revolving doors, he heard applause outside. Curious, he looked through the glass. Several black luxury vehicles pulled up to the entrance. Journalists rushed forward. Camera flashes lit up the morning. Nathan stepped aside as Isabella stepped out of the lead vehicle. She looked elegant in a navy blue tailored suit, her hair neatly tied back. Yet what caught everyone's attention wasn't her appearance. It was the way she greeted people. She stopped to shake hands with the security guards. She thanked the receptionist by name. She smiled at the cleaning staff. Everyone smiled back. Nathan remembered something she used to tell him. A person's title should never determine how much respect they deserve. Back then, he had admired that about her. Somewhere along the way, he had forgotten. Before Nathan could call her name, another voice reached him. Isabella. A tall man in his mid-30s walked toward her carrying a bouquet of white lilies. He had an easy smile and kind eyes. The moment Isabella saw him, her face lit up. Not with romance. With genuine happiness. Nathan had not seen that smile in years. The man handed her the flowers. I heard the board meeting went well. It did, Isabella replied with a laugh. Thank you. You skipped breakfast again, didn't you? She smiled sheepishly. Maybe. I knew it. He reached into his briefcase and handed her a small paper bag. I brought your favorite spinach pastries. Nathan stood frozen. The simple exchange reminded him of another time. Another life. When Isabella used to prepare breakfast for him every morning. He had barely noticed. Now. Someone else did. Richard Bennett suddenly appeared beside Nathan. I was wondering how long it would take before you came. Nathan looked at him. Who is he? Richard followed his gaze. His name is Gabriel Lawson. Nathan watched as Gabriel and Isabella walked toward the entrance together, laughing about something. They seem. Richard finished the sentence for him. Happy? Nathan didn't answer. Richard continued. Gabriel knew Isabella long before you did. Nathan frowned. I've never heard his name. You wouldn't have. He spent several years working overseas. When he returned, he learned Isabella was married. So he respected her marriage and stayed away. Nathan's heart sank. And now? Richard looked directly at him. Now she's divorced. Nathan swallowed hard. Are they together? Richard smiled slightly. Not yet. The word yet echoed painfully in Nathan's mind. Later that afternoon, Nathan returned to Whitmore Technologies. His assistant rushed into his office. Sir, we've received an invitation. Nathan looked exhausted. Invitation to what? She handed him a gold envelope. He opened it. Inside was an invitation to the National Business Excellence Gala, the country's most prestigious business event. Every influential entrepreneur would be there. Government officials. International investors. Corporate leaders. Then Nathan noticed the keynote speaker. Ms. Isabella Foster. His heart skipped a beat. She would be addressing the nation's most powerful business leaders. The woman he once claimed had nothing to contribute. That evening, at the Foster estate, Isabella sat on the back terrace overlooking the lake. Gabriel joined her with 2 cups of tea. You've been quiet today. She smiled faintly. I saw Nathan. Gabriel nodded. I know. He came looking for you. I wasn't ready. You don't owe him anything. She stared at the calm water. I know. After a long silence, Gabriel asked gently. Do you still love him? Isabella thought for several moments. Finally, she answered honestly. I'll always care about the man I married. She looked down at her tea. But that man doesn't exist anymore. Gabriel didn't try to change her mind. He simply sat beside her. Sometimes, the greatest comfort isn't finding someone with the perfect words. It's finding someone willing to share your silence. As the sun disappeared behind the trees, Isabella felt something she hadn't felt in years. Peace. She didn't know what the future held. But for the first time since signing the divorce papers, she wasn't afraid of it. Far across the city, Nathan stood alone in his office, staring at the gala invitation. He had one chance to speak to Isabella. One chance to tell her everything he had finally learned. One chance to ask for forgiveness. What he didn't know was that the gala would reveal one final truth. A truth that would leave the entire room speechless. The grand ballroom of the Royal Meridian Hotel glittered beneath crystal chandeliers. Politicians. International investors. Fortune 500 CEOs. Media executives. Some of the most influential people in the country had gathered for the National Business Excellence Gala. Nathan Whitmore adjusted his tie as he stepped inside. Just a year ago, he would have entered this room with confidence. Tonight, he felt like he didn't belong. People greeted him politely, but the conversations ended quickly. Some avoided eye contact. Others whispered as he walked past. The investigation nearly destroyed his company. I heard several banks refuse to finance him. They say he's looking for investors. Nathan pretended not to hear. For the first time in his life, his reputation entered the room before he did. Suddenly, the lights dimmed. The master of ceremonies walked onto the stage. Ladies and gentlemen, Tonight, we honor a leader whose vision has transformed industries, created thousands of jobs, and changed countless lives through generosity. A giant screen lit up. Images appeared one after another. Children receiving scholarships. New hospitals opening. Families moving into affordable homes. Small businesses celebrating new beginnings. The audience applauded. The host smiled. Please welcome Chief Executive Officer of the Foster Group, Ms. Isabella Foster. The ballroom erupted into applause. Nathan slowly turned toward the stage. Isabella walked into the spotlight wearing a simple emerald green evening gown. She wore no extravagant diamonds. No flashy jewelry. Only the same silver necklace her grandmother had given her years ago. The audience rose to its feet. A standing ovation. Nathan remained frozen. He remembered another evening, when his mother had mocked that very necklace because it wasn't expensive enough. How little they had known. Isabella stepped to the podium. She smiled as the applause faded. Thank you. When people hear the word success, they usually think of money, power, recognition. She paused. But the older I become, the more I believe success is measured by something else. She looked around the room. By the number of lives you improve. The audience nodded. My grandfather taught me that wealth is only meaningful when it becomes a blessing to someone else. So every decision I make begins with one question. Who will this help? Another round of applause filled the ballroom. Nathan couldn't take his eyes off her. She hadn't changed. Success hadn't made her arrogant. It had simply given her a larger platform to be the person she had always been. After the speech, the host returned to the stage. Before we present this year's Humanitarian Leadership Award, we have one more surprise. Several people looked at one another curiously. The host smiled. Someone requested permission to share a personal story about tonight's guest. Nathan frowned. He hadn't expected this. The host continued. Please welcome Mr. Edward Collins. Nathan's eyes widened. Edward? The former Whitmore family butler slowly walked onto the stage. The audience applauded politely. Edward adjusted the microphone. I spent nearly 20 years working for one family. He smiled gently. But the greatest privilege of my career was knowing Ms. Isabella Foster. Isabella looked surprised. She hadn't known Edward would be speaking. Edward continued. Most people here know Isabella as a successful businesswoman. They know her as a philanthropist. But very few know the woman behind those titles. The ballroom grew quiet. I watched her wake before sunrise every day to prepare breakfast for a family that rarely thanked her. Nathan lowered his head. I watched her spend birthdays alone because her husband chose business meetings instead. A painful silence spread through the room. I watched her smile through insults she never deserved. Several guests exchanged uncomfortable glances. Edward looked toward Isabella. And I watched her protect people who never realized she was protecting them. Nathan's heart pounded. Edward reached into his jacket and unfolded a letter. There is one story I've carried in my heart for years. He looked toward Nathan. One winter evening, Mr. Whitmore's father suffered a medical emergency. The family believed insurance covered every expense. It didn't. Nathan closed his eyes. He already knew where this was going. Edward continued. I watched Isabella leave the hospital, drive straight to a private auction house, and sell the only thing she had left from her grandmother. Gasps echoed throughout the ballroom. She cried in the car afterward. But before she went back inside the hospital, she wiped away every tear. And smiled. So no one would know. Complete silence filled the room. Many guests looked toward Isabella with tears in their eyes. Edward folded the letter. She never wanted praise. She never wanted recognition. She only wanted the people she loved to be happy. Nathan felt tears running down his face. For years, he had believed he was the one who sacrificed for his family. Now the truth stood before hundreds of witnesses. He had never come close to matching Isabella's love. Edward looked directly at the audience. So if you remember Isabella for anything, don't remember her because she's wealthy. Remember her because even when she had every reason to become bitter, she chose kindness. The ballroom erupted into the longest standing ovation of the night. People wiped away tears. Business leaders applauded. Journalists hurried to capture the moment. Nathan remained standing, unable to clap. Not because he didn't want to. Because he couldn't stop crying. As the applause continued, Isabella walked onto the stage and embraced Edward tightly. "Thank you," she whispered. Edward smiled. "The world deserved to know." Just then, the host returned to the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have one final announcement. The board of the National Business Council has unanimously selected this year's recipient of the Lifetime Legacy Award." He opened a gold envelope. "And the winner is..." He smiled toward Isabella. "Ms. Isabella Foster." The audience exploded with applause once again. But as Isabella accepted the award, Nathan noticed something that made his heart sink even further. Standing in the front row, watching her with quiet pride, was Gabriel Lawson. And in his hand was a small velvet ring box. The applause slowly faded. Nathan's eyes never left the small velvet box in Gabriel Lawson's hand. His chest tightened. For the first time since meeting Isabella, he truly understood what it felt like to lose her. Not to divorce her. Not to walk away. To lose her. Forever. As the ceremony ended, hundreds of guests surrounded Isabella. Government officials congratulated her. Business leaders asked for photographs. Journalists requested interviews. Nathan stood on the edge of the crowd, waiting. 5 minutes passed. Then 10. Finally, Isabella noticed him. For a brief moment, their eyes met. Nathan slowly walked toward her. The conversations around them faded. "Isabella." She looked at him calmly. "Hello, Nathan." It was the first time they had spoken since the divorce. I need to talk to you." She glanced at the people waiting for her. "This isn't the right place. It may be my only chance." She studied his face. The confident businessman she once knew was gone. The man standing before her looked exhausted. Broken. Ashamed. After a long silence, she nodded. 5 minutes. They stepped onto a quiet balcony overlooking the city. The sounds of the gala disappeared behind the closed doors. Only the cool evening breeze remained. Nathan struggled to find the right words. "I know an apology isn't enough." "It isn't," Isabella answered honestly. He nodded. "I know." He looked down at his hands. "I learned everything. The investment. My father's treatment. The jewelry. The anonymous donations." His voice cracked. "You gave me everything. And I treated you like you had nothing." Isabella remained silent. Nathan wiped away a tear. "I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't deserve another chance. I only wanted you to hear one thing." She waited. "I'm sorry." The words were simple. But they carried years of regret. "I wasn't blinded by success. I was blinded by my own pride. I let people convince me that money and status mattered more than the person who stood beside me." He looked into her eyes. "And I destroyed the best thing that ever happened to me." Silence settled between them. Finally, Isabella spoke. "Do you know what hurt me the most?" Nathan slowly shook his head. "It wasn't the divorce. It wasn't your mother's insults. It wasn't Amelia's cruelty." She took a slow breath. "It was your silence." Nathan lowered his head. "When they called me worthless, I kept waiting for you to say, 'That's my wife.'" A tear rolled down her cheek. "You never did." Nathan couldn't look at her. Because she was right. Every single time. He had chosen silence. A few moments later, Isabella reached into her evening bag. Nathan looked confused. She removed a small envelope. "I was going to destroy this." She handed it to him. "What is it?" "Open it." Nathan unfolded the letter. It was dated 6 years earlier. His heart stopped. It was written in Isabella's handwriting. "My dearest Nathan. If you're reading this, it means I've finally found the courage to tell you the truth. My family is wealthy, but I've hidden that part of my life because I wanted someone to love me for who I am, not for what I own. Every day I spend with you convinces me that you're that person. Tomorrow, on our anniversary, I plan to tell you everything. I hope you'll laugh with me about the secret I've been carrying. No matter what happens, thank you for loving the real me. Forever yours, Isabella." Nathan's hands began to tremble. You were going to tell me?" She nodded. "The night before our anniversary." "What happened?" A sad smile crossed her face. "You canceled dinner." Nathan remembered. He had chosen an overseas business meeting instead. "I told myself." She continued softly. "I'd tell you after your next project. But there was always another meeting. Another deal. Another reason to wait. Eventually. The right moment never came. Nathan closed his eyes. One decision. One cancelled dinner. It had changed everything. Just then, the balcony door opened. Gabriel stepped outside. He immediately sensed the emotion between them. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt. Isabella smiled gently. It's okay. Gabriel looked at Nathan. I'll wait inside. He turned to leave. Gabriel. He stopped. She walked over to him. Without hesitation. She slipped her hand into his. Nathan felt another piece of his heart break. She looked back at Nathan. I've forgiven you. Nathan's eyes widened. You have? She nodded. Forgiveness sets my heart free. She paused. But forgiveness isn't the same as going back. Nathan closed his eyes. He understood. Some doors, once closed, could never be opened again. As Isabella and Gabriel walked back toward the ballroom together, Nathan remained alone on the balcony. The city lights shimmered below. For years, he had chased success. Tonight, he realized success meant very little when there was no one left to celebrate it with. Inside the ballroom, the guests applauded as Isabella returned. Nathan quietly walked toward the exit. No reporters stopped him. No one called his name. He stepped into the cool night air. For the first time in his life, he understood that the greatest loss a person can suffer isn't losing wealth. It's losing someone who loved them without conditions. But Nathan didn't know. Life still had one final lesson waiting for him. A lesson that would change not only his future, but the future of everyone connected to the Whitmore name. 6 months later. The city was buzzing with excitement. The wedding of Isabella Foster and Gabriel Lawson had become one of the year's most anticipated events. But not because it was extravagant. In fact, Isabella had requested something very different. No celebrity performances. No unnecessary luxury. And instead of expensive wedding favors, she smiled at the event planner. Use that money to build another children's hospital. The planner couldn't hide her admiration. I've organized weddings for some of the wealthiest families in the country. She smiled warmly. I've never met a bride like you. Isabella simply replied. My grandfather taught me that love isn't measured by how much you spend. It's measured by how much you give. The ceremony was held in the gardens of the Foster estate. White roses lined the stone pathway. A gentle breeze carried the sound of a string quartet. Close friends. Employees. Scholarship students. Doctors from the hospitals Isabella had funded. Families whose lives had been transformed by the Foster Foundation. They were all invited. Not because of their status, but because they had become part of Isabella's journey. A black car stopped quietly outside the estate gates. Nathan Whitmore stepped out. He wasn't there as a guest. He had no invitation. He had only one purpose. To keep a promise he had made to himself. He handed a small gift box to the security guard. Please give this to Ms. Foster after the ceremony. The guard nodded. Would you like to leave a card? Nathan smiled sadly. No. She'll know. He looked toward the beautifully decorated garden one last time. Then turned to leave. He didn't try to interrupt. He didn't try to stop the wedding. Some acts of love meant knowing when to let go. As the ceremony began, Gabriel stood beneath the flower arch. When Isabella appeared, every guest rose to their feet. She wore a timeless white gown, elegant but simple. Around her neck, the same silver necklace her grandmother had given her years ago. Nothing about Isabella had changed. She was still the woman who believed kindness mattered more than wealth. She reached Gabriel. He smiled. You look beautiful. She laughed softly. You've already told me that 3 times today. I'll probably say it 100 more. The guests chuckled. The officiant began the ceremony. He spoke about trust, sacrifice, respect. The very things that make love endure. Then came the vows. Gabriel looked into Isabella's eyes. I can't promise that life will always be easy. But I promise you'll never have to wonder whether you're valued. I'll defend you when you're absent. I'll stand beside you when you're weak. And I'll choose you. Every single day. Tears filled Isabella's eyes. When it was her turn, she smiled through them. I've learned that real love isn't about finding someone perfect. It's about finding someone who makes you feel safe enough to be yourself. You've given me that gift. And I'll spend the rest of my life protecting yours. The officiant smiled. By the authority entrusted to me, I now pronounce you husband and wife. The guests erupted into applause. As Gabriel kissed Isabella, even the staff wiped tears from their eyes. Later that afternoon, the security guard approached Isabella. Mrs. Lawson. Someone left this for you. She opened the small wooden box. Inside was the silver wedding ring Nathan had placed on her finger 6 years earlier. Beside it lay a folded note. It read, Dear Isabella, I once believed success meant building the biggest company, owning the finest home, and earning the admiration of strangers. You spent years trying to teach me that success begins with how we treat the people who love us. I was too blind to understand. Today, I return the ring because it no longer belongs to me. Keep it only as a reminder that someone can lose everything, without losing a single dollar. Thank you for loving me when I hadn't yet learned how to love you. I hope your future is filled with the happiness I failed to give you. Goodbye. Nathan. A tear rolled down Isabella's cheek. Gabriel gently squeezed her hand. Are you okay? She smiled. Yes. She looked toward the sky. I think we've both finally found peace. She carefully closed the box. Not with regret, but with gratitude. She had survived. She had healed. And she had learned that walking away from the wrong person often makes room for the right one. Across the city, Nathan stood inside a modest office. Whitmore Technologies was gone. He had sold the company months earlier to repay every employee, supplier, and creditor. He could have declared bankruptcy and protected his fortune. Instead, he chose accountability. He had started over. Not as the CEO of a billion-dollar corporation, but as the founder of a small consulting firm that helped young entrepreneurs avoid the mistakes he had made. His office was simple. No marble floors. No luxury furniture. Just honesty. A framed photograph sat on his desk. It wasn't a picture of success. It was an old photograph of two young people sitting in a tiny cafe. A spilled cup of coffee. Two genuine smiles. The day he had met Isabella. His assistant walked in. Mr. Whitmore, your first client is here. Nathan smiled. I'll be right there. Before leaving his office, he looked once more at the photograph. I finally understand, he whispered. You never had nothing. I was the one who couldn't see your true worth. He turned off the office light and walked out. Not as the man who had lost everything, but as a man determined never to make the same mistake again. Because sometimes, the greatest success isn't becoming rich. It's becoming the kind of person who deserves to be loved. Never judge someone's worth by their wealth, appearance, or social status. The most valuable people are often the ones who expect nothing in return, give without seeking recognition, and love with sincerity. Money can build a fortune, but only character can build a life worth living. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications for more emotional stories about love, betrayal, redemption, and justice. And tell us in the comments, at what moment did Nathan realize he had truly lost everything?